Hi, I'm Michael Thornhill, co-founder of Inner Truth Seekers, and today we're going to be talking about trauma transformation and non-duality, or trauma healing and non-duality. And those two things can often seem quite contrary because non-duality, simply explained, is that there is one consciousness, one beingness, and that is the infinite presence that is the very truth of who we are, that is beyond the illusion of separation. Yet trauma is based in the experience of separation. The very experience or the effects of trauma come from feeling separate from the infinite self, feeling separate from each other, and then also from people who really truly feel and know themselves to be as separate from oneness or consciousness, and then perpetuate out trauma to others because they feel so disconnected from their own selves, their own inner truth. So how do we combine these two seemingly opposite ends of the scale of the spectrum, one being beyond the illusion of separation, and two, transforming things that have occurred within the illusion of separation? Now, if you followed my work or our teachings at Inner Truth Seekers, you'll know that we always say just take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Your inner truth will show you who you truly are more than anyone can ever share or say. So these videos are just an invitation for you to connect to your own deeper direct awareness and find out what's true for you. But here's my experience. With traditional trauma healing modalities, which can be absolutely beneficial, and in my experience, they have been greatly beneficial for me, when we only believe ourselves to be a person, the level of transformation that can occur has a ceiling. It is because only the person can be transformed, only the person can be healed. And there is this kind of underlying concept that you are a traumatized person who has healed from trauma. There's still an identification with the person who was traumatized, who had been recovered. You may even identify as someone who has healed themselves from trauma. And that's why, in my experience with traditional trauma healing or trauma transformation modalities, that there's a ceiling that gets hit. And that ceiling is that you still identify as a person, or you still identify as someone who was traumatized who is now recovered, but you never fully transform your experience of physical reality because of that identification. The analogy that I like to use is about having a piece of driftwood in a fish tank. And in this analogy, the driftwood is a traumatic experience or event, and the fish tank is the body or the person in which that event is stored. So with the relative size of the driftwood to the fish tank, you can see that it takes up quite a large amount of space. When we're identified as the person, we have a limited construct of who we are, just like a fish tank has its own size constraints. Yet, if we begin to move more into a non-dual awareness, we can become more aware of our oceanic-like nature, where we're this ocean of infinite consciousness. So if we bring this piece of driftwood into the ocean, it has much less of an effect upon the ocean than it does upon the water in the fish tank. Relatively, it's insignificant, or much less significant at least. And over time, that ocean as well, with the waves and the current, will begin to break down that piece of driftwood, and it will dissolve back into that infinite ocean. When we can incorporate non-duality to trauma transformation, we're not bypassing the trauma, we're changing our relationship to it. We're becoming more aware of our oceanic-like nature and less confined by the construct of our personality or our physical body. Now, why this can be beneficial is that tuning into your infinite nature is not about bypassing the trauma. It's about integrating it into your true nature. So, if we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle on the table, how can we complete the puzzle. And if we approach trauma transformation without being aware of our true infinite nature, we do hit that ceiling. That's certainly been my own experience, that we are just a person who is healed from trauma or who is trying to heal from trauma. And there's nothing to do that will change the fact that those traumatic experiences have happened to you. But when we start to connect to our infinite nature that exists beyond the experience of physical reality, we can then change our relationship to those events and those experiences which happen to us. It also means that our trauma transformation process can be non-linear, that we don't have to necessarily wait for us to go through what can sometimes be a difficult or challenging or grueling process of step-by-step transforming the trauma to be able to get these glimpses of the awareness that's already free, that's already transformed, that's already healed. So incorporating non-dual meditation, non-dual inquiry, non-dual practices into your trauma transformation process, whether you are someone who is personally transforming trauma or if you professionally help others transform trauma, here's my experience. That non-dual state can be accessed here and now, and it doesn't require the long process of transforming trauma to be able to access that state of freedom. But it doesn't mean that going through that process of transforming trauma isn't necessary. It just means that you can get access to that state beyond the trauma now and breathe a sigh of relief. And simultaneously, when you become more practiced at integrating and holding both your non-dual awareness and awakened state simultaneously with the contracted experiences of trauma, just like the analogy that we've used today, it's like moving that driftwood from that small container of the physical body and bringing it into that oceanic awareness. It actually helps you to transform trauma. But here's the caveat. In some non-dual practices, there is a tendency to not acknowledge the trauma or just to bypass it or to believe that it's not a useful part of the process or the experience. That's not my belief, that's not my practice, that's not how I work, but it's up for you to tune in for your own self in terms of what your effective path, what your most authentic path with non-dual awakening is for you. But if you do desire to transform your own experience of trauma through non-dual awakening practices, then there's a possibility that if you incorporate those together, that can be highly catalytic, it can be highly transformative, and not only does it help you to shift and transform the effects of trauma, it also transforms your experience of physical reality, and it also gives you an opportunity to be able to access freedom when freedom doesn't seem available. And the continued practice of returning to that infinite non-dual state is an opportunity for you to transform the way that you live your life. You can become less identified with the person who has experienced trauma, and you can see that trauma is just one part of a much larger puzzle of your experience and your existence. So if this video resonated with you, I'd invite you to check out our free 8-day Inner Truth immersion at innertruthseekers.com. And if you liked this video, please hit subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks so much. I'll see you soon.